My name is Mark Stevens. I'm 56 years old, and this story begins on a cold Christmas Eve I'll never forget. I was walking into my son's warm, beautifully decorated home, ready to celebrate with family, when his words froze me in place. He wrapped his arms around me, smiled, and said, "Dad, hope you're enjoying that $8,000 a month support." In that moment, my chest tightened, my mind raced, and I knew this night would change everything. Backhand index pointing right before I share what happened next. Tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. The December wind bit at my face as I stepped out of my old pickup, a truck that had seen more oil changes than holiday dinners. I clutched the gift bag in my hand. Simple things. A sweater for my grandson, a cookbook for my daughter-in-law, a tool set for my son. The street was lined with bright houses, but it stood out. White lights draped along the gutters, wreaths on the windows, the kind of picture-perfect home you see on greeting cards. I adjusted my jacket, brushed off the salt from the road, and reminded myself to smile. Inside, the laughter hit me first. Kids running down the hall, a dog barking happily, Christmas music weaving through conversations. The smell of cinnamon, roasted turkey, and pine filled the air. I paused at the doorway to take it in. Not because I was overwhelmed by the beauty, but because, for a moment, I felt like a visitor. Not the man who once worked 3 shifts to keep a roof over his family's head. "Dad," my son called, his voice carrying across the living room. He was taller now, broader, with a confidence that came from stability I never had. He walked toward me, wearing a crisp sweater, his watch catching the light. My chest warmed at the sight of him. For a second, he was 5 again, running into my arms after a long day. But the second passed, and now he was a man greeting his aging father. I noticed his wife by the kitchen island, arranging appetizers on a tray. She was always polite, always gracious, but I sensed a quiet distance. Maybe it was my own insecurity. Maybe it was the unspoken truth that we lived in very different worlds. I worked 60 hours a week at 3 jobs, janitorial work at a school, part-time warehouse shifts, weekend handyman gigs. They lived comfortably, maybe even generously. That was fine. I never asked for more than a little time together. As I took off my jacket, I could feel my shirt still damp from the cold and from earlier sweat. My body ached, my hands rough from tools and cleaning products. But I didn't want that to show. Christmas was for smiles. My grandson barreled into me first, almost knocking the bag out of my hand. "Grandpa," he shouted. He smelled like sugar cookies and shampoo. I bent down, hugged him tight, and let that joy fill me. I moved into the living room, nodding at familiar faces, shaking hands with a couple of my son's friends. One of them, a man in a blazer, looked me over like he was sizing up a stranger. I didn't take it personally. Not everyone knows what hard work looks like when it's done quietly. There was a moment small, but I felt it, when I caught my reflection in the window. My hair thinner, lines deeper, the weight of years showing. And yet, there was pride there too. Pride in having survived, in raising a son who didn't have to break his back to make ends meet. "Dad, grab a drink," my son said, gesturing toward the bar area. I declined politely. I didn't drink much, too expensive, too distracting. But I appreciated the gesture. Dinner was still an hour away, so people mingled, laughing about travel stories and work projects. I stayed close to the tree, admiring the decorations. Each ornament told a story. Their wedding photo in a tiny frame, my grandson's school craft hanging crookedly, a silver star at the top. I remembered Christmases when I could barely afford gifts, when my wife and I would wrap small toys and pretend they were more than they were. Those nights taught me that love and effort could make even the simplest moments shine. But this Christmas was different. There was a weight I couldn't shake. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the quiet voice in my head saying, "They think you're fine. They think you're coasting." The evening hummed along until my son made his way back to me. He looked happy, comfortable, like a man who belonged in every room. And then, without warning, he wrapped me in a strong hug. "Dad," he said, his voice loud enough for a few people nearby to hear. "Hope that $8,000 a month support is treating you well." The words hit harder than any winter chill. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I froze, half smile still on my face. wondering if I heard him right. My mind flashed through bills unpaid, shifts missed, tools carried in aching hands. Did he really believe I was living off him? Did everyone else? I looked around. A few heads turned. His wife's face didn't move. She kept arranging appetizers, but slower, like she was listening. Someone coughed to break the silence. Inside, my thoughts collided. I wasn't angry yet, just stunned. My son's success didn't bother me. His generosity didn't bother me. But this was a window into how they saw me. And it stung. I said nothing. Not yet. Instead, I let the moment hang, like a snowflake before it lands, knowing that when it did, it might crack the whole night open. I stood frozen, my son's arm still loosely around me, his words still hanging in the air like smoke you can't wave away. Hope that $8,000 a month support is treating you well. It was meant as a light remark, maybe even a joke, but to me, it landed like a quiet accusation. My smile faltered, and I could feel the blood rush to my ears. The hug ended, but the moment didn't. My son pulled back, clapping my shoulder as if nothing had happened, his face cheerful, oblivious. "Come on, Dad," he said. "Let's get you a plate." His voice was casual, warm even, but my mind was already buzzing. $8,000 a month? Where did that number even come from? I followed him toward the dining room, my legs moving on autopilot, my thoughts nowhere near the table set, with fine china and candles. Instead, I was back in my small apartment, the one-bedroom unit above a laundromat that smelled faintly of detergent and old vents. My phone screen flashing overdue bills, my hands raw from scrubbing floors, my knees aching after a shift at the warehouse. I glanced at his wife. She caught my eye, offered a polite smile, but there was something in it, something almost rehearsed, like she already knew the script. Was this a joke between them? Did they think I was quietly living off their generosity? When we reached the table, people were chatting again, clinking glasses, laughing at something my grandson said. I sat down, tried to steady my breathing, but my mind was restless. I studied my son across the table, watching the way he carved the turkey, his confident movements, the easy laughter that followed his words. He was proud of his success, and rightly so. But that one sentence gnawed at me. A plate was set before me, food piled high, sweet potatoes, green beans, ham rolls. It smelled incredible, but I barely tasted it. My appetite was buried under the weight of those words. I kept replaying them, wondering how many times they'd been said when I wasn't around. Halfway through dinner, my grandson spilled his juice. It splashed onto the tablecloth, bright orange against the white fabric. Instinct kicked in. I reached for a napkin, ready to clean it, but my daughter-in-law was quicker. "It's fine, Mark," she said gently. "We've got it." Her tone was kind, but carried an undertone I couldn't ignore, as if she were reminding me that I didn't need to do the work here. I forced a smile and leaned back. My hands were shaking slightly. My son noticed. "You all right, Dad? You're quiet tonight." Quiet. If only he knew. I cleared my throat. "I'm fine. Just tired. Long week." My voice sounded steady, but inside, I was unraveling. Tired? That was an understatement. 60 hours a week, 3 different uniforms, a body that felt 20 years older than it was. That was my reality. The conversation moved on, but my thoughts didn't. Each laugh, each story about work trips and investments, felt like a reminder of the gap between us. And that number, $8,000, hung over me like an unwanted banner. I excused myself after dinner to help clear plates. Old habits die hard. I couldn't just sit while others worked. In the kitchen, away from the noise, I rinsed dishes, letting the warm water run over my hands. It soothed me a little, but not enough. My son came in, carrying a tray of empty glasses. "Dad, you don't need to do that," he said with a chuckle. "You're our guest." I kept my eyes on the sink, just helping. Old habit. He set the tray down and leaned against the counter, watching me. "Seriously though, you've been awfully quiet. Everything okay?" I turned to face him, meeting his eyes. $8,000 a month. Where'd you get that idea? He blinked, surprised. "What? You said it when you hugged me. Like it's a fact. Like I'm living off you." For a moment, his expression shifted. Confusion. Then something else. Something guarded. Dad, it was a joke. I didn't mean anything by it. You know we'd always help you if you needed it. Help me. Those words cut deeper than I expected. I appreciate that, I said slowly. But I've never asked for help. Not from you, not from anyone. He raised his hands, palms out. I know. It was just we talk sometimes, me and Sarah, about how we wish you'd slow down, you know. Maybe retire early. You've worked enough for 10 men. I thought maybe, if we sent some money. Sent some money? My voice was calm but firm. Son, I'm still working 60 hours a week. 3 jobs. That's my reality. There's no 8,000 coming in. There never has been. The kitchen went quiet. His wife had walked in mid-conversation, holding a dish towel. She froze, hearing my words. Her face softened, but her eyes darted to my son, questioning. Dad, he said quietly, you never told us that. We thought, honestly, we thought you were doing okay. You never complained. We figured you were set. Set. I almost laughed, but there was no humor. I get by barely, but I work for every dollar. I scrub floors at night, haul boxes on weekends, fix pipes during the day. That's what's keeping me going. Not charity. Not $8,000. My son looked down, his jaw tightening. His wife's hand reached for his arm. The sound of laughter from the living room seemed distant now, like it belonged to another world. I didn't know, he said finally. I swear I didn't know. We shouldn't have assumed. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Assumptions can hurt, especially when they make a man feel like he's something he's not. For a long moment, no one moved. The hum of the dishwasher was the only sound. Then my son stepped closer. His voice was softer now. Dad, I didn't mean to embarrass you. That hug, it was supposed to be proud, not condescending. I'm sorry. The apology was real, but the sting hadn't left. That hug, that one sentence, had opened a door I wasn't sure how to close. As I wiped my hands on a towel, I realized something else. This wasn't just about money. It was about understanding, respect, and the quiet battles we fight alone. And tonight, whether I liked it or not, those battles had finally stepped into the light. The kitchen felt too small for the 3 of us. The clatter of dishes from the dining room faded into the background, replaced by a tense quiet that seemed to thicken the air. My son stood across from me, his wife by his side, both of them suddenly looking younger, almost unsure. And I stood there with a dish towel in my hands, feeling like a man who had been carrying a secret weight for years and finally let it slip into the open. I can't believe this, my son said at last, his voice low, as if he were speaking to himself. You're really working 3 jobs? Dad, why? You could have told me. We could have helped. Because it's not your job to carry me, I replied firmly. I raised you to stand on your own feet, and I do the same for myself. That's how I was taught. His wife stepped forward slightly. Mark, this doesn't make sense. We thought you were retired, or at least comfortable. You never let on. We just assumed you had savings, maybe investments. I shook my head slowly. I had plans, but life doesn't always respect plans. After your mom passed, things changed. There were bills you didn't see, repairs, medical costs, and I didn't want to burden you with any of that. You had your own life to build. His face softened at the mention of his mother, but confusion still lingered. So all this time you've been what? Cleaning offices? Working nights? And you didn't say a word. I set the towel down, finally meeting his eyes. I didn't want pity. I didn't want you to look at me and see someone who couldn't handle his own life. I wanted you to remember your dad is strong, independent. The words hung there, heavier than the plates stacked behind me. His wife glanced at him, then back at me. Mark, we never thought of you as weak. We didn't know. That's all. Something cracked in my son's expression then, a mix of guilt and realization. Dad, I thought all these years, I thought you were just keeping busy. You'd call, talk about work like it was nothing. I didn't know it was a necessity. I feel like I failed you somehow. Failed me. I let out a quiet laugh. though it carried no joy. You didn't fail me. You did what I always wanted. You built a good life. You're successful. You take care of your family. That's all I ever wanted for you. My struggles were mine to handle. He moved closer, his voice tight. But you shouldn't have been alone in this. We're family. We could have eased that load. And now, knowing you're working that hard, Dad, it doesn't sit right with me. For a moment, none of us spoke. The hum of the dishwasher seemed louder, the faint sound of Christmas music, drifting from the other room oddly distant. My mind drifted to those nights at the warehouse, the cold air seeping through my gloves, the sound of forklifts echoing in the background, to the plumbing jobs in drafty basements, the janitorial shifts where the world slept while I pushed him up. I thought of the pride I carried quietly, the sense of purpose, and now the sharp sting of misunderstanding. I'm not ashamed of the work, I said finally. I'm proud I can still stand on my own. But hearing you think I was living off you, that stung. I don't blame you, but it hurt. His wife touched his arm, her eyes glassy. We didn't mean it like that. It was just a joke, but we realized now how wrong it sounded. Words matter, I said softly. Sometimes more than we think. The weight of the conversation pressed down on us until finally, my son reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, truly, but things can't stay this way. We need to figure something out. You can't keep grinding like this. Let me help. Not because you can't, but because you shouldn't have to anymore. I looked at him, my stubbornness wrestling with the warmth in his voice. It's not about pride. It's about dignity. And I still have that. I know you do, he said. But even the strongest men deserve rest. The sincerity in his voice cut through me. For the first time, I realized maybe this wasn't about pride or shame. It was about connection. Maybe my silence had built walls where there should have been bridges. I sighed, feeling the tension in my shoulders ease slightly. Let's talk after the holidays. I'll tell you everything. No secrets this time. But for tonight, can we just be a family? His smile was faint but genuine. Yeah, tonight we just enjoy the evening. But as we stepped out of the kitchen, the mood was different. The laughter from the dining room still carried. But now there was an unspoken understanding between us. A shift had happened, something raw and honest exposed. Back in the living room, gifts were being opened, paper torn and scattered. My grandson ran up to me with a small box. Grandpa, this one's for you, he shouted, his eyes shining. I took it, smiling, my heart strangely full and heavy at the same time. As I unwrapped the gift, a framed photo of us all together, I realized something. Maybe it wasn't weakness to let your family know your battles. Maybe it was trust. My son caught my eye from across the room, a silent promise in his look. And for the first time in a long while, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to fight every battle alone. The paper scraps still littered the floor like confetti from some unplanned celebration. The framed photo rested on my lap, and though the voices around me carried cheer, something quieter hummed beneath it all. My son's glance still held that unspoken promise, but now there was something else too, a kind of watchfulness, as though he were seeing me through a different lens. I felt at the moment I placed the photo on the coffee table. The energy in the room, subtle yet undeniable, had changed. People were still laughing, opening gifts, making small jokes about who got socks again this year, but a thread of something deeper wove itself through the noise. I could sense my son and his wife keeping one eye on me, like they were waiting for some cue, some opening. I shifted in my chair, stretching my back as my grandson climbed up beside me. Grandpa, you like it? He asked, pointing at the frame. I love it, I said softly, ruffling his hair. This is the best gift I've gotten in a long time. But as I spoke, I noticed my son had moved closer to the edge of the couch, leaning forward slightly. He wasn't looking at the gifts anymore. His attention was anchored to me, and I could feel his wife's quiet support beside him. They weren't saying anything yet, but the weight of their silence was almost louder than the chatter around us. My daughter-in-law excused herself to bring more drinks, and when she returned, she handed me a glass first. Here, she said warmly, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes. Concern, maybe, or resolve. It was then I realized the family room felt smaller than before. Maybe it was the soft glow of the tree lights or the way the music had dipped into a slower carol, but everything seemed more intimate, more deliberate. My son finally spoke, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "Dad, after tonight, things aren't going to be the same. We've been talking. We want to change this for you." The word struck me gently, but firmly, like a hand on my shoulder. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I studied the frame again, the photo inside it, the faces of people who meant everything to me. "Mark," his wife added softly, leaning forward, "we've been thinking. There's no reason you should keep working yourself like that. Not when you've given so much to this family. Let us do something for you. Just once. Let us be the ones to carry the load." I let out a slow breath, unsure of what to say. Pride is a quiet thing. It doesn't always shout, but it can stand tall, blocking the simplest of gifts. "I appreciate it," I began, keeping my voice steady. "But I don't need handouts." My son didn't flinch. "It's not a handout, Dad. It's family. You've spent your life making sure we were taken care of. Maybe it's time to let someone return the favor. Not because you can't, but because you shouldn't have to." Something softened inside me at those words, but I fought it. "I've managed this long," I replied. "I don't need anyone to fix things for me." "I'm not trying to fix anything," he said, a quiet conviction settling into his tone. "I'm trying to honor you, to thank you. Isn't that worth something?" The room seemed to fade for a moment, their voices the only ones I heard. My grandson's laughter, the ripping of wrapping paper, even the music, all of it blurred into background noise. My mind turned inward, touching old memories, the nights spent counting bills, the sting of empty rooms after my wife passed, the weight of responsibility pressing down, but never breaking me. And yet here I was, staring at the grown man my son had become, realizing he carried some of that same weight now. But for me, "Dad," he said again, softer this time, "you don't have to say yes tonight. Just promise you'll think about it." I hesitated, then nodded once. "I'll think about it." It wasn't surrender, but it was a door left unlocked. That seemed to be enough for him. His shoulders eased, and I could see the faintest relief cross his face. His wife smiled gently, her hand finding his. As the evening rolled on, the mood lightened again. There were more gifts, more jokes, and even a few stories from years past. But underneath it all, the shift remained. It was like an undercurrent, soft, steady, undeniable. When dessert came, my son insisted on serving me first. A small gesture, maybe, but it carried more weight than he probably realized. His wife brought me an extra slice of pie, saying, "You've earned it." And though she meant it playfully, the words settled in a deeper place. Later, when the younger ones were in the kitchen cleaning up, my son sat beside me again. "Dad," he said, "no matter what you decide, just know this. You're not alone. Not anymore." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked at the tree, the ornaments my wife used to love, the flicker of lights reflecting off the photo frame. There was a warmth in the room I hadn't felt in a long time, not just from the fire, but from something unspoken. And for the first time that night, I let my guard drop a little. "Thank you," I said quietly. It was all I could manage, but it was enough. The moment passed without fanfare, but it stayed with me, lingering like the faint scent of pine. It wasn't a dramatic scene, no tears or grand speeches, but it was real. And sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. A quiet shift, a simple understanding, the feeling of finally being seen. The laughter had faded into a softer hum, like the closing notes of a favorite song. My grandson was asleep on the couch, his head resting against a pillow embroidered with my late wife's initials, and the rest of the family moved quietly around the house, tidying up in a kind of unspoken harmony. I stayed in my chair, hands folded loosely, staring at the photo frame on the coffee table. The glow from the tree lights reflected off the glass, casting a gentle shimmer over the faces that meant everything to me. It was in that stillness, when the noise of the evening gave way to the softer rhythm of thought, that I began to feel the weight of something I hadn't wanted to face. All night, my son's words had circled in my mind, brushing against that stubborn pride I had carried for so long. He wanted to help. They all did. And for the first time, I wasn't just resisting out of habit. I was afraid of what it meant to accept. The truth was, I'd built my entire life on the idea that strength meant carrying the load yourself. My father taught me that, and the only way he knew how, by example. I remembered him coming home late, boots heavy with mud, hands scarred and calloused, never once complaining. He never asked for help. He simply endured. As a boy, I admired him for it. As a man, I mirrored him. But now, watching my own son step into that role, I wondered if maybe my father's silence wasn't strength, it was sacrifice. I leaned back in the chair, my gaze shifting to the family photos on the mantel. Each frame held a piece of my story. Birthdays, graduations, weddings, even quiet Sunday afternoons captured in fading color. Those pictures were reminders of moments when I chose work over rest, responsibility over leisure. And yet, here I was, realizing that the best parts of life were never the sacrifices themselves. They were the people who made them worth it. The sound of footsteps pulled me from my thoughts. My son appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. "Too much pie," I said with a small smile, though we both knew that wasn't the reason. He sat across from me, setting 1 mug on the table. "I wanted to say something," he began, his voice quiet but firm. "Tonight when we talked, I wasn't trying to make you feel like you weren't enough. I just wanted you to know we see you. Everything you've done, everything you still do." I looked at him, really looked at him. He was a grown man, but in moments like this, I could still see the boy who used to follow me around the yard, asking questions about every tool I picked up. "You've become a good man," I said finally. "Better than I ever was." He shook his head. "I learned from the best. But Dad, I think sometimes you confuse being strong with being alone. You don't have to carry it all by yourself. That's not what family is for." Those words settled into me like stones dropped into still water, rippling outward. Maybe he was right. Maybe strength wasn't about how much you could carry, but about knowing when to let someone walk beside you. For a long moment, we sat in silence, sipping coffee, the house quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. Then I spoke, almost to myself. "I think I've spent so long looking forward, trying to keep things together, that I forgot to look around. There's a lot to see when you finally stop moving." My son smiled. "That's the thing, Dad. You never really stop. You just change how you move." We talked like that for a while, about nothing and everything. About the year he almost quit college, but didn't because he didn't want to disappoint me. About the trip we never took, because I was too busy working. About the way his kids light up when I'm around, something I'd taken for granted. Each memory unfolded like an old letter, creased but still legible, and each one carried a quiet lesson I hadn't fully understood until now. It wasn't one big revelation, but a series of small ones, threaded together by love and time. The lesson that stayed with me most wasn't about money or responsibility or even pride. It was about presence, the gift of showing up, not just for others, but for yourself. "Dad," he said after a pause, "you always told me life doesn't slow down for anyone. But maybe it doesn't have to. Maybe we just have to decide what's worth keeping pace with." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm settle over me. He was right. Maybe it was time to stop fighting the current and start learning to drift a little, to trust the people who wanted to walk alongside me. As the night stretched on, the house growing quieter with each passing minute, I realized that the shift we'd felt earlier wasn't just a moment. It was a turning point. A quiet decision to let go of something I'd carried for too long. The lessons I carried from that night weren't written down, but they were etched deep. That love is not a debt, that pride can be softened without being broken, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family is the chance to give back. When I finally stood to leave, my son followed me to the door. He didn't hug me this time. He didn't need to. There was an understanding between us now. Something quiet but unshakable. Before I stepped out, I turned to him and said, "You were right. It's not about carrying it all. It's about carrying it together." His smile said everything I needed to hear. And as I walked to my truck, the cold night air biting at my face, I realized that some lessons don't just stay forever. They grow, shaping the people we become and the families we keep.